They begged for heroes. But Earth sent its monsters. This was a headline that spread like wildfire across the galaxy. It all started in the small town of Ainsworth, where glittering stars filled the night sky, creating a world that seemed peaceful. But beneath the surface, darkness lurked. Alien invaders, known as the Zoltrax, had set their sights on Earth. The Zoltrax were fierce and ruthless. They traveled in giant ships, dark as night, and their eyes glowed with menacing red. Their goal was simple: conquer planets and harvest their resources. Earth was on their list, and the people of Ainsworth felt the threat inching closer every day. As the invasion began, panic spread through the town. Citizens fled to shelters, and the once quiet streets echoed with cries for help. The mayor, a brave woman named Clara, stood at the center of confusion. She raised her hands to quiet the crowd. "We need heroes," Clara shouted. "We need someone to save us." But no one answered her call. People looked at each other in fear, hopelessness washing over their faces. It was then that Clara realized the truth. They had to rely on something beyond human heroes. Far below the Earth's surface, in a hidden lab, scientists have been experimenting with DNA from various creatures. They wanted to create protectors, beings that could withstand the pressures of an alien attack. But they were not exactly heroes. Instead, they had made monsters. Deep in the lab, caged and waiting, were three creatures: Grom, a hulking brute with the strength of 10 men; Seraph, a bat-like creature with sharp claws and incredible speed; and Luma, a shimmering being made of pure light, who could manipulate shadows. Together, they were the last hope for Earth. As Clara considered her options, she was approached by the lead scientist, Dr. Miles. "Mayor, we have something that might help," he said nervously. "They are not traditional heroes, but they could fight for us." Clara hesitated. "Are they safe? What if they turn on us?" Dr. Miles shook his head. "They are programmed to protect. We can control them." With no other choice, Clara consented. "Let's bring them out." The lab doors opened, and the monster stepped into the light. Grom was enormous and intimidating, with muscles rippling beneath his rough skin. Seraph flapped his wings, casting dark shadows against the walls, while Luma glowed gently, illuminating the room. The crowd gasped at the sight of them. "We need you," Clara told the creatures. "The Zoltrax are coming. Will you help us?" Grom nodded slowly, his eyes locked on Clara's. Seraph tilted his head, and Luma flew around Clara in a circle, signaling readiness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first Zoltrax ship entered the atmosphere. It cast a long shadow over Ainsworth, sending shivers down the spines of its citizens. Clara watched in the town square with a mix of fear and hope. The alien ship landed in a field outside the town, and the Zoltrax began to emerge. They were lean and tall with sharp claws and armored skin. They screeched their war cries, ready to claim Earth as their own. Clara stood firm, her heart pounding. "It's time!" she shouted to Grom, Seraph, and Luma. Grom charged forward, a giant among the Zoltrax. He swung his massive fists, sending aliens flying in all directions. Seraph soared above, using his claws to swoop down and slash at the invaders from above. Luma created bright flashes of light that confused the Zoltrax, making them stumble as they tried to fight back. The battle raged on, with the cries of the Zoltrax echoing through the night. Clara watched in awe as her monsters fought courageously. It was a chaotic dance of strength and speed, and it seemed that victory was within reach. But just as the tide seemed to turn, a gigantic Zoltrax commander emerged from the ship, towering over the battlefield. With a twisted grin, he activated a powerful energy field that began to drain the strength from Grom, Seraph, and Luma. "Foolish creatures," the commander taunted. "You think you can defeat us?" Clara felt a surge of panic. The monsters were losing their power. "Don't give up," she shouted, hoping her voice would reach them. Grom struggled against the energy drain, his muscles straining with effort. Seraph, weak but still fighting, charged at the commander in a last-ditch effort. Luma, brightening around the edges, focused all of its strength to shield its friends from the energy. Clara realized they needed a plan. "Luma, can you absorb the energy?" she shouted. Luma hesitated for a brief moment, then nodded and expanded its form, absorbing the glowing energy that radiated around the commander. The energy crackled inside Luma, building to a blinding light. In that moment, Grom seized the opportunity. With a roar, he charged at the commander, delivering a blow that sent the alien staggering backward. Seraph swooped in and delivered a final slash, bringing the commander to his knees. The remaining Zoltrax began to retreat, fear spreading among their ranks. The townspeople cheered as the creatures triumphed. Clara looked at Grom, Seraph, and Luma, her heart swelling with pride. They were not heroes in the traditional sense, but they had fought valiantly to protect Earth. As the last of the Zoltrax fled into the night sky, Clara stepped forward, raising her hands in gratitude. "Thank you, my friends. You have saved us." Grom nodded, his serious expression softening. Seraph let out a happy screech, and Luma floated above, transforming the battlefield into a shimmering light. The monsters of Earth had become the very heroes the people had begged for. In a world filled with darkness, they had found the light within themselves, proving that true strength came in many forms. Now, the people of Ainsworth would always remember that when heroes are needed, sometimes what you find are monsters that protect, monsters that fight for what is right. They had changed the fate of Earth, and together they would face whatever came next. Title: Echoes of Redemption Sci-Fi. The plea crackled across the cosmos, a desperate whisper carried on the backs of dying stars. The Xylos, a species of gentle bioluminescent beings, were on the brink of annihilation. The KRYLL, a ravenous swarm of insectoids, had descended upon their world, devouring everything in their path. The Xylos, pacifists by nature, had no defense, no hope. They sent out a call, a universal SOS. "Heroes, save us!" Earth received the message. Humanity, fractured and scarred by its own history of violence, was an unlikely candidate for saviors. Yet, a spark of empathy flickered within the collective consciousness. The United Earth Council, after weeks of heated debate, reached a decision. They wouldn't send soldiers, not exactly. They would send those who knew the darkness, those who had danced with chaos and emerged, changed, from the abyss. They would send their monsters. The transport ship, the Cerberus, was a grim vessel, its hull scarred with the battles it had carried. Inside, stasis pods hummed, cradling the sleeping forms of the Chosen. Leading this unlikely band of heroes was Anya Petrova, once a ruthless mercenary, now haunted by the ghosts of her past. Her skills with a blade were legendary, but her heart was a battlefield of regret. Beside her was Marcus Grimaldi, a cybernetically enhanced brute, his body a testament to the horrors of war, his mind struggling to reconcile the machine with the man he once was. Then there was Dr. Eris Thorne, a brilliant but morally ambiguous scientist, whose experiments had blurred the lines between life and death. Rounding out the group was Kai, a young telepath, burdened with the ability to hear the thoughts of others, a gift that often felt like a curse. Anya woke first, the cold of the ship jolting her awake. She stretched, her muscles aching, and looked around at her companions. Grim was already awake, his cybernetic eye glowing in the dim light. Eris was tinkering with the device, his brow furrowed in concentration. Only Kai remained asleep, his face peaceful, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. "We're approaching Xylos," Anya announced, her voice raspy. "Time to earn our redemption." The planet was a jewel of vibrant colors, but beneath the beauty lay a chilling truth. The KRYLO were everywhere, a black tide consuming the land. The Xylo cities, once beacons of light, were now shrouded in darkness. The Cerberus landed near the capital city, a cluster of crystalline towers that were slowly being overrun. The team emerged, weapons ready, and were immediately met by a delegation of Xylos. They were frail beings, their bodies shimmering with soft light, their eyes wide with fear and hope. "You came." Their leader, a gentle elder named Lyra, said, her voice barely a whisper, "You are our heroes." Anya exchanged a look with Grim. Heroes? They were anything but. "We'll do what we can," Anya said, her voice firm. "Tell us about the KRYLL." Lyra explained that the KRYLL were relentless, driven by an insatiable hunger. They communicated through a hive mind, making them difficult to predict. Their only weakness seemed to be a sensitivity to high-frequency sound. Eris, ever pragmatist, immediately began working on a device that could exploit this weakness. Grim, eager to unleash his rage, began fortifying the city's defenses. Kai, his face pale, retreated into himself, overwhelmed by the Coelho's alien thoughts. Anya knew they were outmatched, but she refused to back down. She had made a promise, and she intended to keep it, even if it meant facing death. The first attack came at night. The KRYLO swarmed the city, their chitinous bodies clicking and hissing. Anya and Grim stood at the front lines, cutting down wave after wave of the insectoids. Eris's device emitted a high-pitched screech that momentarily stunned the KRYLO, giving them a brief respite. Kai, despite his fear, used his telepathic abilities to disrupt the KRYLO's hive mind, sowing confusion and disarray. But it wasn't enough. The KRYLO were too numerous, too relentless. As the city fell, Anya knew they had to change their strategy. They couldn't win a war of attrition. They had to strike at the heart of the KRYLO hive. We need to find their leader, Anya said, her voice grim. Kill it, and the rest will fall apart. Kai, reluctantly, agreed to use his abilities to locate the KRYLO leader. He closed his eyes, his face contorted in pain, and reached out into the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, he gasped, his eyes snapping open. I found it, he said, his voice trembling. It's in the center of their hive, deep underground. The team prepared for their final mission. They knew it was a suicide run, but they had no other choice. They fought their way through the KRYLO ranks, their bodies battered and bruised, their spirits weary but unbroken. They reached the entrance to the hive, a gaping maw in the earth. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of decay and the buzzing of countless insects. They descended into the darkness, their weapons drawn. The KRYLO leader was a monstrous creature, a queen swollen with eggs, her body pulsating with dark energy. She was surrounded by a legion of drones, all fiercely loyal to their queen. The battle was brutal. Anya and Grim fought with ferocity born of desperation, their skills honed by years of bloodshed. Eris's device proved invaluable, disrupting the KRYLO's communication and giving them an edge. Kai, despite his fear, used his telepathy to turn the KRYLO against each other. But the KRYLO leader was too powerful. She unleashed a psychic blast that sent them reeling. Anya fell to the ground, her vision blurring. Grim roared in defiance, but he was overwhelmed by the drones. Just when all hope seemed lost, Eris stepped forward. He had been working on a second device, a weapon of unimaginable power. He activated it, and a wave of energy washed over the KRYLO leader. The queen shrieked in agony, her body convulsing. The drones around her began to disintegrate. The KRYLO leader exploded, her body erupting in a shower of gore and chitin. The hive fell silent. The remaining KRYLO, without their leader, scattered and fled. The Xylos were saved. Anya, Grim, Eris, and Kai emerged from the hive, battered but alive. They had done the impossible. They had become heroes. The Xylos greeted them with tears of gratitude. They hailed them as saviors, as legends. But Anya knew the truth. They were not heroes. They were monsters who had found a way to use their darkness for good. As the Cerberus prepared for its return journey, Anya looked back at Xylos. The planet was healing, its cities slowly being rebuilt. The Xylos were singing, their voices filled with hope. Anya smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. They had come to Xylos seeking redemption, and they had found it, not in the accolades of others, but in the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had made a difference. They were still monsters, but perhaps, just perhaps, they were monsters worth saving. The Earth had sent its monsters, and in doing so, it had sent its hope. Title: They begged for heroes, but Earth sent its monsters. In the year 2120, Earth was lost. The once green and vibrant planet was now a desolate wasteland, ravaged by war and climate change. Cities were in ruins, and life struggled to survive. Humans had been pushing the limits of technology to save themselves when they realized they needed help. But the help they sought was not from their own kind. They wanted heroes, legendary figures who could save them from the brink of extinction. On a small abandoned island off the coast of what used to be Florida, a group of scientists gathered. Among them was Dr. Maya Chun, a renowned biologist. She had spent years studying the DNA of Earth's extinct creatures, hoping to find a way to bring them back. The group discussed creating a new line of heroes, legendary beasts from the past that could save humanity. We have the technology to revive them, Maya explained. Dinosaurs, mammoths, and even ancient predators. They may be our best chance at survival. Around the table sat 3 other key figures. Dr. Samuel Reed, a geneticist who specialized in cloning, Captain Leo Vargas, a former military officer, and Dr. Emily Zhao, an expert in environmental science. They shared a bond, fueled by desperation, but also hope. As they debated, the lights flickered. The world outside buzzed with uncertainty. People were begging for heroes, for someone to change their fate. Are we ready to take this leap? Leo asked, leaning forward in his chair. He had fought many battles and respected strength in whatever form it took. We have to, Maya replied, her voice steady. If we don't do this, we will have nothing left to protect. That night, they activated the project they called Resurgence. The lab hummed to life as they filtered ancient DNA through powerful machines. They chose 4 creatures, a Tyrannosaurus rex, a woolly mammoth, a saber-toothed tiger, and a pterosaur. Each creature had once ruled its domain, and their strength gave the team hope. Weeks passed as the machines whirred. Finally, the day arrived when they would breathe life into their creations. As the first creature awakened, a loud roar filled the lab. The T-Rex stood tall, its scales glistened in the artificial light. Maya's heart raced. He's magnificent, she whispered, awe spreading through her. Next, the woolly mammoth lumbered to its feet, its long tusks glinting. The saber-toothed tiger snarled, showing its fierce teeth as the pterosaur surveyed from above, its wings stretching wide. They were no heroes of the past, but monsters who had once ruled the earth. As the creatures adjusted to their surroundings, the scientists faced a new challenge: training them. For days, they worked with the beasts. Leo took the lead, teaching them commands and how to respond to human emotions. He had a way with the creatures, something that impressed the team. Maya marveled at the bond forming between Leo and the T-Rex, which they named Rex. We need to prepare them for the outside world, Maya said during a meeting. They'll need to keep the peace if we face threats. The day came when they decided to introduce the creatures to humanity. They approached a small town with a hastily assembled crowd. The townspeople were anxious, confused about what to expect. As they saw the mighty beasts, gasps filled the air. "I thought we were getting heroes," shouted an angry voice from the crowd. "This is a nightmare," cried another. Undeterred, Leo stepped forward. "Listen, these creatures are our only chance. We have to trust them." He motioned to Rex, who lifted his massive head and let out a powerful roar that echoed across the town. The crowd fell silent, their fear replaced by a mix of awe and wonder. Slowly, the beast began interacting with the townspeople. The pterosaur flew above, showing off its grace, while the saber-toothed tiger nuzzled a child who was brave enough to approach. The mammoth, gentle and wise, walked slowly beside residents, calming their worries. Over the following weeks, the creatures began to prove their worth. They protected towns from raiders and wild animals, all while displaying surprising intelligence. People started to see them as heroes, not monsters. But not everyone was happy. A rival faction, the Coalition, arose. They believed the world needed to revert to more advanced technology, not revive ancient beasts. Led by Marcus Hale, a charismatic man with a silver tongue, he rallied followers to fight against the monstrosities. "They're just animals," Marcus shouted during a rally. "We must not replace our hope for machines with these ancient creatures." Conflicted feelings echoed through the populace. Some sided with Marcus, while others aligned with Leo and the team. Tension grew, straining communities. One fateful night, the Coalition launched an attack against the town, believing they could rid themselves of the beast forever. The creatures quickly sensed the danger. Rex, the T-Rex, roared defiantly and charged at the attackers. The mammoth stood firm, using its size to block the path, while the saber-toothed tiger darted among the assailants, protecting those it saw as friends. The pterosaur swooped above, startling enemies and providing aerial support. The battle was intense. The creatures fought fiercely, displaying bravery beyond what anyone could imagine. With the team's guidance, they coordinated their efforts, turning the tide against the coalition. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the coalition retreated. The fragile peace held, and the town celebrated its defenders, the once feared monsters who had become their heroes. In the following weeks, the team built bridges between the town and the creatures. They showed people that monsters could be protectors, and that heroes did not always wear capes. Maya felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing she had played a part in creating this new bond. "We beg for heroes," Leo said one evening, watching the sunset behind the horizon. But Earth delivered what we needed. Underneath the changing sky, they knew they were at a turning point. The past was not lost. The creatures had not only revived the spirit of strength, but taught humanity a lesson in acceptance. Together, they would face whatever future challenges lay ahead, monsters and humans side by side. As days turned to months, Earth was not just surviving, it was healing, all thanks to the heroes crafted from its history, monsters who protected their new companions with fierce loyalty. Here's the story. The year is 2342. Earth, once a vibrant blue jewel in the inky black, was now a scarred and weary warrior. Decades of environmental neglect, followed by a resource war that made the Cold War look like a playground squabble, had left the planet depleted. Humanity, however, had survived, clinging to existence with a stubbornness that bordered on the absurd. They had also reached the stars, not as conquerors, but as scavengers, picking at the scraps of a galaxy already carved up by older, more powerful civilizations. The Proxima Centauri system was their lifeline, a small colony, barely self-sufficient, but it was a foothold. Then the Xylos arrived. The Xylos were a race of energy beings, beautiful and terrifying. They drifted through space like living nebulae, their forms shimmering with iridescent light. They were also dying. Their star, Xylos Prime, was collapsing and they needed a new home. They found it in the Kepler 186F, a lush, Earth-like planet orbiting a red dwarf star not far from Proxima Centauri. The problem? Kepler 186F was already inhabited by the KRYLL. The KRYLL were not beautiful. They were insectoid, with chitinous armor and multifaceted eyes that glittered with cold intelligence. They were also fiercely territorial and technologically advanced. The Xylos, weakened and desperate, sent out a plea across the galactic network. They begged for heroes. Earth, battered and bruised, heard the call. The United Earth Confederacy, a loose alliance of nations still recovering from the resource war, debated for weeks. Sending aid meant risking what little they had. But the potential reward, alliance with a powerful, grateful species, was too tempting to ignore. But Earth didn't send heroes. It sent what it had. Monsters. Commander Eva Rostova was not a hero. She was a survivor. Scarred both physically and mentally by the war, she commanded the Cerberus, a modified mining vessel repurposed for combat. Her crew was a motley assortment of veterans, convicts, and misfits, the dregs of society that had chewed them up and spat them out. "They want heroes, Commander," said Lieutenant Jien, her second-in-command, a quiet, efficient man who had seen too much death. "We're hardly knights in shining armor." Eva stared out at the swirling nebula that was the Xylos fleet. "No," she said, her voice gravelly. "We're not, but we're what they've got." The plan was simple, brutal, and utterly insane. The Cerberus would infiltrate the KRYLL defenses, disable their orbital cannons, and create a window for the Xylos to land on Kepler 186F. It was a suicide mission, plain and simple. "Anyone wants off, now's the time," Eva announced to the crew. No one moved. They were all too familiar with death to be afraid of it. The Cerberus plunged into the KRYLL defense grid. The ship shuddered as energy weapons pounded against its shields. Eva barked orders, her voice calm and steady amidst the chaos. Jen called out targeting solutions, his fingers flying across the console. The crew worked with grim efficiency, their faces etched with determination. They were not heroes. They were mechanics, hackers, and soldiers, driven by a desperate hope for a better future. But they were good at what they did. They disabled the first orbital cannon with a daring maneuver, using the debris from a destroyed freighter as cover. The second fell victim to a virus Jen had crafted, a digital plague that crippled its targeting systems. The KRYLL responded with fury. Swarms of fighters descended upon the Cerberus, their weapons blazing. The ship was rocked by explosions, alarms blared, and the air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal. Then came Zara. Zara was a mountain of a woman, genetically engineered to be a super soldier. She was also a psychopath, barely contained by the neural implants in her brain. But she was the best close-quarters combatant they had. "Let me loose, Commander," she growled, her eyes gleaming with manic energy. "Let me show these bugs what we're made of." Eva hesitated. Zara was a weapon, a loose cannon, but they needed every advantage they could get. "All right, Zara," she said, "but keep it clean." Zara grinned, a terrifying sight. She grabbed a plasma rifle and charged into the breach, a one-woman wrecking crew. The KRYLL fighters didn't stand a chance. She tore through them like a whirlwind, her rifle spitting out bolts of searing energy. The Cerberus limped towards a final orbital cannon. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by a swarm of fighters, and shielded by a powerful energy field. "We can't crack that shield," Jen said, his voice strained. "We're out of options." Eva looked at the bridge crew, their faces grimy and exhausted. They had given it their all, but it wasn't enough. Then a voice crackled over the comms. It was Marcus, the ship's engineer, a skinny, nervous kid who was more comfortable with machines than with people. "Commander," he said, his voice trembling, "I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work." Marcus's idea was insane. He had jury-rigged a device that could overload the Cerberus S engines, creating a massive energy surge. They would ram the orbital cannon, using the surge to disrupt the shield and disable the weapon. "It's a one-way trip, Commander," Marcus said. "We won't survive the impact." Eva looked at the crew. They knew what she was going to ask. They nodded, their faces grim but resolute. "Do it, Marcus," she said. "Let's give these bastards a show they won't forget." The Cerberus accelerated toward the orbital cannon, its engines screaming in protest. The KRYLL fighters swarmed around them, firing everything they had. The ship shook violently, but it held together. They were almost there. "Brace for impact," Eva said, her voice calm. The Cerberus slammed into the orbital cannon. The world dissolved into a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. The shield flickered and died. The orbital cannon went silent. The Cerberus was gone. The Xylos fleet descended upon Kepler 186F. The KRYLL, their defenses shattered, were quickly overwhelmed. The Xylos had found a new home. Back in the Proxima Centauri system, the human colonists watched the battle unfold on their monitors. They had witnessed a miracle, a testament to the resilience and the darkness that resided in the hearts of humanity. They had begged for heroes. And Earth, in its infinite wisdom, had sent its monsters. The galaxy would never be the same. In the distant future, Earth lay in ruins. A series of wars and natural disasters had ravaged the planet, leaving only small pockets of survivors. These people struggled for food, clean water, and safety in a world full of danger. The few remaining nations knew they needed heroes, brave individuals who could lead and inspire hope. They began to call out into the vastness of space, begging for someone to save them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cosmos, a race known as the Zeppelins received these desperate cries. The Zeppelins were known for their advanced technology and deep sense of justice. They heard the whispers of Earth, the pleas for heroes to emerge, and they decided to answer the call. However, they misunderstood what was truly needed. High Commander Laxer stood on the bridge of the Zeppelin flagship, glancing at the holographic map of Earth. His thick brows furrowed in concern. Instead of sending noble warriors, Laxer decided to send what he thought would be a fitting response, a battalion of creatures known as the Garathians. They were massive, powerful beings from his home planet, strong enough to crush any enemy, but lacking in the gentle understanding the people of Earth truly needed. Commander Laxer activated the communication device. "Prepare the Garathians for transport. We are sending them to Earth." Meanwhile, on Earth, a small group of survivors huddled in the ruins of a city. They were led by a courageous woman named Maya. She had seen her friends and family perish around her, but refused to give up hope. She had one goal: to find a way to bring the unity and strength back to her people. "Listen," Maya shouted to the others one night as they gathered around a flickering flame. "We need heroes. We need someone to lead us out of this darkness." Everyone nodded, their eyes filled with despair and longing. Little did they know, heroes were on their way, but not in the way they expected. Days passed, and as the survivors looked up at the sky, they saw something strange. A massive ship descended, casting a large shadow over the remnants of the city. It landed with a thud, shaking the ground. Jitters of fear ran through the crowd. They didn't know if this arrival was a promise of hope or another threat. The ship opened, and out came the Garathians. Huge and intimidating, their muscles rippling under their thick, scaly skin. They roared as they stepped onto the earth, their voices echoing through the air. Instead of the heroes the people hoped for, they were met with monsters, warriors ready to fight but lacking in compassion. Maya stepped forward, her hand raised in a sign of peace. "What do you want?" "We call for help." One of the Garathians, a hulking figure with glowing blue eyes, stepped forward. "We have come to protect you," he growled in a deep voice. "You were weak. We are strong." Maya exchanged worried glances with her group. Their situation was precarious. They needed help, but the Garathians were terrifying. "We need help to rebuild, not just to fight," she replied bravely. The Garathian looked confused. "Fight we will. Lead you we shall." Panic seized the people's hearts. They feared they might become victims rather than allies. They needed guidance, understanding, and wisdom, not more conflict. Maya knew she had to change the Garathians' way of thinking. With courage, Maya spoke to the giant. "We are not your enemies. We want peace. Show us how to fight for our future, not against each other." The Garathians hesitated, their eyes flickering with uncertainty. They had never been told to help instead of conquer. Just then, a small boy named Alex, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Despite his tiny size compared to the gigantic Garathian, he looked up, his eyes filled with innocence. "Can you teach us?" Alex asked nervously. "Can you show us how to be strong like you? Together we can be heroes." The Garathians exchanged glances, their fierce gazes softening as they listened to the little boy's words. There was something in that request that touched a chord deep within them. The idea of teaching instead of fighting intrigued them. Perhaps they could reshape their purpose. "Teach," the blue-eyed Garathian responded slowly. "We will." Days turned into weeks, and the Garathians began to train the survivors. Instead of just physical combat, they taught Maya and her people how to create defenses, gather food, and harness hidden strengths. The once frightened survivors grew stronger while under the guidance of their newfound teachers. They built homes, farms, and defenses against the threats that still loomed over them. As their trust developed, the Garathians began revealing parts of their culture. They loved stories, music, and camaraderie. The humans shared their own stories, forming bonds that transcended their differences. Laughter filled the air, shattering the tension that had once existed. One day, after many months of training together, the Garathians and humans faced an unexpected threat. A band of marauders who sought to take advantage of Earth's weakened state. This time, Maya and her group stood shoulder to shoulder with the Garathians, ready to protect their new home. The battle was intense, but it quickly changed when the Garathians led the fight while Maya and her people used their skills to strategize. They worked as one unit, combining their strengths. In that moment, true heroes emerged, not from mere legend or elsewhere in the universe, but from the unity forged between these unlikely allies. When the dust settled, they had won. The Garathians roared in victory, and the humans cheered. They were no longer scared of the creatures who had come from the stars. They were friends, partners in survival, and champions of hope. The call for help had been answered, right from the monsters they never wanted. In that union, they found their strength in a new kind of heroism that defined what it truly meant to protect one another. From that day on, Earth thrived anew, not just because of strength, but because they became a family, together. They learned that sometimes the answer to a plea for heroes might come in the most unexpected forms. Characters: Asterisk Jax, a hardened, cynical soldier, haunted by his past. Asterisk Kira, a brilliant but eccentric scientist, always pushing boundaries. Asterisk Zorgan, the desperate alien leader, pleading for help. Asterisk Counselor Valerius, a skeptical and cautious member of the Galactic Council. They begged for heroes, but Earth sent its monsters. The transmission crackled to life on the Galactic Council's main screen. A gaunt, purple-skinned alien with pleading eyes filled the view. This was Zorgan, leader of the KRYL, a species on the brink of annihilation. Honored counselors. Zorgan's voice trembled. We are besieged. The Forlag, a swarm of ravenous bioengineered horrors, have overrun our defenses. We beg for assistance. Any assistance. Counselor Valerius, a being of pure logic and calculated risks, addressed the assembly. The KRYL are a minor species, with limited strategic value. Sending aid would be costly and could provoke the Forlag further. A chorus of murmurs rippled through the council chamber. The Forlag were a threat to be reckoned with, a plague that consumed everything in its path. No one wanted to draw their attention, but the KRYL's desperation was palpable. Finally, a compromise was reached. A single, expendable force would be sent. A gesture of goodwill, nothing more. The choice was obvious. Earth. Earth was a backwater planet, a volatile mix of warring nations and bizarre cultures. Their technology was primitive, but their capacity for violence was legendary. Perfect. On a dusty military base in Nevada, Jack stared at the holographic projection of Zorgan. His face was etched with weariness, his eyes reflecting the ghosts of battles past. He was a soldier, through and through, but he was tired of fighting. So were saviors now? Jax asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. General Miller, a gruff, no-nonsense officer, clapped him on the shoulder. You and your squad, Sergeant. You're the best we've got. Make us proud. Jax's squad was a motley crew of misfits and mavericks. There was Doc Riley, the medic with a dark sense of humor, and Hammer Johnson, the heavy weapons expert with a gentle soul. And then there was Kira, the scientist. Kira was a whirlwind of energy and unconventional ideas. She was tasked with understanding the Forlag biology and finding a weakness. She saw them not as monsters, but as a puzzle to be solved. They're fascinating, really, Kira chirped, examining a Forlag tissue sample under a microscope. Their cellular structure is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's almost engineered. Jax eyed her skeptically. Engineered to kill everything in sight. The journey to the KRYL homeworld was long and uneventful. Jax used the time to prepare his squad, running drills and simulations. He knew that they were walking into a slaughterhouse, but he refused to let his fear show. When they arrived, the KRYL were in a state of utter collapse. Their cities were burning, their defenses shattered. The Forlag swarmed everywhere, a tide of claws and teeth and insatiable hunger. Zorgan greeted them with a mixture of relief and trepidation. You are our only hope, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Jack surveyed the carnage around him. We'll do what we can. The battle was brutal and chaotic. The Forlag were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. Jax and his squad fought with ferocity born of desperation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they refused to yield. Hammer Johnson mowed down Forlag with his minigun, his face a mask of grim determination. Doc Riley patched up the wounded, his hands moving with practiced speed. Kira, armed with a modified pulse rifle, analyzed the Forlag's movements, searching for a pattern, a weakness. Jax led the charge, his rifle blazing, his body a whirlwind of controlled violence. He had seen death countless times, but the sheer scale of destruction here was staggering. He felt a cold, familiar anger rising within him. As the battle raged, Kira made a breakthrough. She discovered that the Forlag were vulnerable to a specific frequency of sonic energy. It disrupted their nervous systems, causing them to convulse and die. She quickly modified their weapons to emit the sonic pulse. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Forlag faltered, their attacks becoming less coordinated. The tide began to turn. Jax pressed the attack, leading his squad to the heart of the four-lag swarm. They fought like demons, fueled by adrenaline and a primal instinct to survive. They were not heroes, not saviors. They were monsters, unleashed upon a world in need. Slowly, painstakingly, they pushed the four-lag back. They reclaimed territory, rescued survivors, and gave the KRYL a fighting chance. Counselor Valerius watched the reports with growing unease. The humans were not behaving as expected. They were not simply holding the line. They were pushing back, decimating the four-lag forces. They are efficient, Valerius admitted, his voice laced with grudging respect. But their efficiency came at a cost. Jax watched as the squad members fell, one by one. Hammer Johnson was torn apart by a four-lag behemoth. Doc Riley was overwhelmed while tending to the wounded. Jax felt a surge of grief and rage. He had come to care for these people, these misfits who had become his family. And now they were dying, fighting a war that was not their own. He found Kira, her face streaked with grime and tears, working frantically on her equipment. "We're winning, Jax," she said, her voice trembling. "We can actually win." Jax looked at her unwavering determination, and he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's finish this." Together, they led the final assault on the four-lag's main hive. It was a desperate, suicidal mission, but they had nothing left to lose. They fought their way through hordes of four-lag, their weapons blazing, their bodies battered and bruised. They reached the hive's core, a pulsating mass of flesh and bioengineered machinery. Kira activated her sonic device, unleashing a wave of energy that ripped through the hive. The four-lag shrieked and convulsed, their bodies dissolving into piles of goo. The hive collapsed, burying the remaining four-lag beneath tons of rubble. The four-lag were defeated. The KRYLO were saved. Jax and Kira stood amidst the ruins, their bodies exhausted, their spirits drained. They had done the impossible. They had sent Earth's monsters and saved a civilization. Zorgan approached them, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You have saved us," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We will never forget your sacrifice." Jax looked at him, his face grim. "We didn't do it for you," he said. "We did it for ourselves." They returned to Earth, not as heroes, but as survivors. They had seen the worst of humanity and the worst of the universe, and they had emerged, scarred but unbroken. The Galactic Council hailed them as saviors. But Jax and Kira knew the truth. They were not heroes. They were monsters, and they had done what monsters do best. They had survived. They had lived to fight another day.